Leviticus, Wayyiqra, chapter 1. And Yahuwah called to Moshe and spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, When any one of you brings an offering to Yahuwah, you bring your offering of the livestock of the herd or of the flock. If his offering is a burnt offering of the herd, let him bring a male, a perfect one. Let him bring it at the door of the tent of meeting, for his acceptance before Yahuwah. And he shall lay his hand on the head of the burnt offering, and it shall be accepted on his behalf to make atonement for him. And he shall slaughter the bull before Yahuwah. And the sons of Aaron, the priest, shall bring the blood and sprinkle the blood all around on the altar which is at the door of the tent of meeting. And he shall skin the burnt offering and cut it into its pieces. And the sons of Aaron the priest shall put fire on the altar, and lay the wood in order on the fire. And the sons of Aaron the priest shall arrange the pieces, with the head and the fat on the wood which is on the fire on the altar. But its entrails and its legs he washes with water. And the priest shall burn all of it on the altar as a burnt offering, an offering made by fire, a sweet fragrance to Yahuwah. And if his offering is from the flock, from the sheep, or from the goats as a burnt offering, let him bring a male, a perfect one, and he shall slaughter it on the north side of the altar before Yahuwah. And the sons of Aaron the priest shall sprinkle its blood on the altar all around, and he shall cut it into its pieces with its head and its fat, and the priest shall arrange them on the wood which is on the fire on the altar. But the entrails and the legs he washes with water, and the priest shall bring it all and burn it on the altar. It is a burnt offering, an offering made by fire, a sweet fragrance to Yahuwah. And if the burnt offering of his offering to Yahuwah is of birds, then he shall bring his offering of turtle doves or young pigeons. And the priest shall bring it to the altar, and shall wring off its head, and burn it on the altar. And its blood shall be drained out at the side of the altar. And he shall remove its crop with its feathers, and throw it beside the altar on the east side into the place for ashes. And he shall split it at its wings, but not sever it. And the priest shall burn it on the altar, on the wood that is on the fire. It is a burnt offering, an offering made by fire, a sweet fragrance to Yahuwah. Leviticus chapter 2. And when anyone brings a grain offering to Yahuwah, his offering is to be of fine flour, and he shall pour oil on it and put frankincense on it. And he shall bring it to the sons of Aaron, the priest, and he shall take from it his hand filled with fine flour and oil with all the frankincense. And the priest shall burn it as a remembrance portion on the altar, an offering made by fire, a sweet fragrance to Yahuwah. And the rest of the grain offering is for Aaron and his sons, most set apart of the offerings to Yahuwah by fire. And when you bring as an offering a grain offering baked in the oven, it is of unleavened cakes of fine flour mixed with oil, or unleavened thin cakes anointed with oil. But if your offering is a grain offering on the griddle, it is of fine flour, unleavened, mixed with oil. Divide it into bits and pour oil on it. It is a grain offering. And if your offering is a grain offering in a stewing pot, it is made of fine flour with oil. And you shall bring to Yahuwah the grain offering that is made of these, and shall present it to the priest, and he shall bring it to the altar. And the priest shall take from the grain offering a remembrance portion, and burn it on the altar, an offering made by fire, a sweet fragrance to Yahuwah. And the rest of the grain offering is for Aaron and his sons, most set apart of the offerings to Yahuwah made by fire. No grain offering which you bring to Yahuwah is made with leaven, For you do not burn any leaven or any honey in an offering to Yahuwah made by fire. Bring them to Yahuwah as an offering of the first fruits, but they are not burned on the altar for a sweet fragrance. And season with salt every offering of your grain offering, and do not allow the salt of the covenant of your Elohim to be lacking from your grain offering. With all your offerings you bring salt. And if you bring a grain offering of your first fruits to Yahuwah, bring for the grain offering of your first fruits green heads of grain roasted on the fire, crushed heads of new grain. And you shall put oil on it and lay frankincense on it. It is a grain offering, and the priest shall burn the remembrance portion from its crushed grain and from its oil, with all the frankincense, an offering made by fire to Yahuwah. Leviticus chapter 3. And if that which he presents is a peace offering, if he is bringing it of the herd, whether male or female, he brings a perfect one before Yahuwah. And he shall lay his hand on the head of his offering, and slaughter it at the door of the tent of meeting. And the sons of Aaron, the priests, shall sprinkle the blood on the altar all around. And from the peace offering he shall bring an offering made by fire to Yahuwah, the fat that covers the entrails, and all the fat that is on the entrails, and the two kidneys, and the fat that is on them by the loins, and the appendage on the liver which he removes with the kidneys. And the sons of Aaron shall burn it on the altar upon the burnt offering, which is on the wood, which is on the fire, as an offering made by fire, of sweet fragrance to Yahuwah. And if that which he presents is from the flock, for a peace offering to Yahuwah, male or female, he brings a perfect one. If he is bringing a lamb as his offering, then he shall bring it before Yahuwah, and shall lay his hand on the head of his offering, and slaughter it in front of the tent of meeting. And the sons of Aaron shall sprinkle its blood on the altar round about. And from the peace offering he shall bring near, as an offering made by fire to Yahuwah, its fat, all the fat tail which he removes close to the backbone, and the fat that covers the entrails, and all the fat that is on the entrails, and the two kidneys, and the fat that is on them by the loins, and the appendage on the liver, which he removes with the kidneys. And the priest shall burn them on the altar as food, an offering made by fire to Yahuwah. And if his offering is a goat, then he shall bring it before Yahuwah, and shall lay his hand on its head, and slaughter it before the tent of meeting. And the sons of Aaron shall sprinkle its blood on the altar all around. And from it he shall bring his offering, as an offering made by fire to Yahuwah, the fat that covers the entrails, and all the fat that is on the entrails, and the two kidneys, and the fat that is on them by the loins, and the appendage on the liver, which he removes with the kidneys. And the priest shall burn them on the altar as food, an offering made by fire for a sweet fragrance. All the fat belongs to Yahuwah, an everlasting law throughout your generations and all your dwellings. You do not eat any fat or any blood. Leviticus chapter 4. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, When a being sins by mistake against any of the commands of Yahuwah, which are not to be done, and shall do any of them, if the anointed priest sins, bringing guilt on the people, then he shall bring to Yahuwah for his sin which he has sinned a young bull, a perfect one, as a sin offering. And he shall bring the bull to the door of the tent of meeting before Yahuwah, and shall lay his hand on the bull's head, and slaughter the bull before Yahuwah. And the anointed priest shall take some of the bull's blood, and bring it to the tent of meeting. And the priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle some of the blood 7 times before Yahuwah in front of the veil of the set apart place. And the priest shall put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of sweet incense before Yahuwah, which is in the tent of meeting, and pour all the blood of the bull at the base of the altar of the burnt offering, which is at the door of the tent of meeting. Then he takes all the fat of the bull as a sin offering, the fat that covers the entrails, and all the fat which is on the entrails, and the 2 kidneys, and the fat that is on them by the loins, and the appendage on the liver, which he removes with the kidneys, as it was taken from the bull of the peace offering. And the priest shall burn them on the altar of the burnt offering. But the skin of the bull and all its flesh, with its head and legs, its entrails and dung, all of the bull he shall bring outside the camp to a clean place where the ashes are poured out, and burn it on wood with fire. Where the ashes are poured out, it is burned. And if the entire congregation of Israel strays by mistake, and the matter has been hidden from the eyes of the assembly, and they have done against any of the commands of Yahuwah, which are not to be done, and shall be guilty, when the sin which they have sinned becomes known, then the assembly shall bring a young bull for the sin, and bring it before the tent of meeting. And the elders of the congregation shall lay their hands on the head of the bull before Yahuwah. And the bull shall be slaughtered before Yahuwah. And the anointed priest shall bring some of the bull's blood to the tent of meeting. And the priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle it 7 times before Yahuwah in front of the veil, and put some of the blood on the horns of the altar which is before Yahuwah, which is in the tent of meeting, and pour all the blood at the base of the altar of burnt offering, which is at the door of the tent of meeting. Then he takes all the fat from it, and shall burn it on the altar. And he shall do with the bull as he did with the bull as a sin offering. So shall he do it. And the priest shall make atonement for them, and it shall be forgiven them. And he shall bring the bull outside the camp, and burn it as he burned the first bull. It is a sin offering for the assembly. When a ruler sins, and by mistake has done against any of the commands of Yahuwah his Elohim, which are not to be done, and shall be guilty, or if his sin which he has sinned is made known to him, then he shall bring as his offering a buck of the goats, a male, a perfect one. And he shall lay his hand on the head of the goat, and slaughter it at the place where they slaughter the burnt offering before Yahuwah. It is a sin offering. And the priest shall take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger, and shall put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and pour its blood at the base of the altar of burnt offering, and burn all its fat on the altar, like the fat of the slaughtering of the peace offering. And the priest shall make atonement for him for his sin, and it shall be forgiven him. And if any being of the people of the land sins by mistake by doing against any of the commands of Yahuwah, which are not to be done, and shall be guilty, or if his sin which he has sinned shall be made known to him, then he shall bring as his offering a female goat, a perfect one, for his sin which he has sinned. And he shall lay his hand on the head of the sin offering, and slaughter the sin offering at the place of the burnt offering. And the priest shall take some of its blood with his finger, and shall put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and pour all the blood at the base of the altar. Then remove all its fat, as fat is removed from the slaughtering of the peace offering. And the priest shall burn it on the altar for a sweet fragrance to Yahuwah. And the priest shall make atonement for him, and it shall be forgiven him. And if he brings a lamb as his sin offering, he brings a female, a perfect one. And he shall lay his hand on the head of the sin offering, and slaughter it as a sin offering at the place where they slaughter the burnt offering. And the priest shall take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger, and shall put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and pour all the blood at the base of the altar. Then he removes all its fat, as the fat of the lamb is removed from the slaughtering of the peace offering, and the priest shall burn it on the altar according to the offerings made by fire to Yahuwah. So the priest shall make atonement for his sin that he has sinned, and it shall be forgiven him. Leviticus chapter 5. And when a being sins, in that he has heard the voice of swearing, and is a witness, or has seen or has known, but does not reveal it, he shall bear his crookedness. Or when a being touches any unclean matter, or the carcass of an unclean beast, or the carcass of an unclean livestock, or the carcass of unclean creeping creatures, and it has been hidden from him, he is unclean and guilty. Or when he touches uncleanness of man, any of his uncleanness by which he is unclean, and it has been hidden from him, when he shall know it, then he shall be guilty. Or when a being swears, speaking rashly with his lips to do evil or to do good, whatever it is that a man swears rashly with an oath, and it has been hidden from him, when he shall know it, then he shall be guilty of one of these. And it shall be, when he is guilty of one of these, that he shall confess that in which he has sinned, and shall bring his guilt offering to Yahuwah for his sin which he has sinned, a female from the flock, a lamb or a female goat, as a sin offering. And the priest shall make atonement for him for his sin. And if he is unable to bring a lamb, then he shall bring to Yahuwah, he who has sinned, 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. And he shall bring them to the priest, who shall bring near that which is for the sin offering first, and wring off its head from its neck, but not sever it. And he shall sprinkle some of the blood of the sin offering on the side of the altar, and the rest of the blood shall be drained out at the base of the altar. It is a sin offering. And he shall prepare the second as a burnt offering according to the right ruling. And the priest shall make atonement for him, for his sin which he has sinned, and it shall be forgiven him. But if he is unable to bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, then he who sinned shall bring for his offering 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a sin offering. He puts no oil on it, nor does he put any frankincense on it, for it is a sin offering. And he shall bring it to the priest, and the priest shall take his hand filled with it as a remembrance portion, and burn it on the altar according to the offerings made by fire to Yahuwah. It is a sin offering. And the priest shall make atonement for him, for his sin that he has sinned in any of these, and it shall be forgiven him, and it shall be the priest like a grain offering. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, when a being commits a trespass, and has sinned by mistake against the set-apart matters of Yahuwah, then he shall bring to Yahuwah as his guilt offering a ram, a perfect one from the flock, with your valuation in shekels of silver, according to the shekel of the set-apart place as a guilt offering. And he shall make good for the sin that he has done against that which is set apart, and shall add 1/5 to it, and give it to the priest. And the priest shall make atonement for him with the ram of the guilt offering, and it shall be forgiven him. And when any being sins, and has done what is not to be done against any of the commands of Yahuwah, though he knew it not, yet he shall be guilty, and shall bear his crookedness. Then he shall bring to the priest a ram, a perfect one, from the flock, with your valuation as a guilt offering, and the priest shall make atonement for his mistake he committed unintentionally, though he did not know it, and it shall be forgiven him. It is a guilt offering. He was truly guilty before Yahuwah. Leviticus chapter 6. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, When any being sins, and committed a trespass against Yahuwah, and has lied to his neighbor about a deposit, or about a pledge, or about a robbery, or shall extort from his neighbor, or has found what was lost, and has lied concerning it, or did swear falsely, so that he sins in regard to any one of all these that a man does, then it shall be, when he sins and shall be guilty, that he shall return what he took by robbery, or what he has extorted, or the deposit which was deposited with him, or the lost item which he found, or all that about which he swore falsely. He shall repay its total value, add 1/5 more to it, and give it to whom it belongs on the day of his guilt offering. Then he brings his guilt offering to Yahuwah, a ram, a perfect one, from the flock, with your valuation as a guilt offering to the priest. And the priest shall make atonement for him before Yahuwah, and he shall be forgiven for whatever he did that made him guilty. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Command Aaron and his sons, saying, This is the Torah of the burnt offering. This is the burnt offering, because it is burned on the altar all night until morning, and the fire of the altar is kept burning on it. And the priest shall put on his linen garment, and put his linen trousers on his body, and shall take up the ashes of the burnt offering which the fire has consumed on the altar, and shall put them beside the altar. And he shall take off his garments, and put on other garments, and shall bring the ashes outside the camp to a clean place. And the fire on the altar is kept burning on it. It is not put out. And the priest shall burn wood on it every morning, and arrange the burnt offering on it, and shall burn on it the fat of the peace offerings. Fire is continually kept burning on the altar. It is not put out. And this is the Torah of the grain offering. The sons of Aaron shall bring it near before Yahuwah in front of the altar, and shall take from it with his hand, from the fine flour of the grain offering, and from its oil, and all the frankincense which is on the grain offering, and shall burn it on the altar for a sweet fragrance as its remembrance portion to Yahuwah. Then Aaron and his sons eat the rest of it. It is eaten with unleavened bread in the set-apart place. They eat it in the courtyard of the tent of meeting. It is not baked with leaven. I have given it to them as their portion of my offerings made by fire. It is most set apart, like the sin offering and the guilt offering. All the males among the children of Aaron eat it, a law forever in your generations concerning the offerings made by fire to Yahuwah. All that touches them is to be set apart. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, This is the offering of Aaron and his sons, which they bring near to Yahuwah, beginning on the day when he is anointed. 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a daily grain offering, half of it in the morning and half of it at night. It is made on a griddle with oil. Bring it in mixed. Bring the baked portions of the grain offering near a sweet fragrance to Yahuwah. And the anointed priest from among his sons who is in his place prepares it, a law forever to Yahuwah. All of it has to be burned, and every grain offering for the priest is completely burned. It is not eaten. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to Aaron and to his sons, saying, This is the Torah of the sin offering, in the place where the burnt offering is slaughtered. The sin offering is slaughtered before Yahuwah. It is most set apart. The priest who is making atonement eats it. In the set-apart place it is eaten, in the courtyard of the tent of meeting. All that touches its flesh is to be set apart. And when its blood is sprinkled on any garment, you wash that on which it was sprinkled in a set-apart place. But the earthen vessel in which it is cooked is to be broken. And if it is cooked in a bronze pot, then it is scoured and rinsed in water. Every male among the priests eats it. It is most set apart. And no sin offering from which any of the blood is brought into the tent of meeting to make atonement in the set-apart place is eaten. It is burned with fire. Leviticus chapter 7. And this is the Torah of the guilt offering. It is most set apart. The guilt offering is slaughtered in the place where they slaughter the burnt offering, and its blood is sprinkled on the altar all around. Then he brings from it all its fat, the fat tail and the fat that covers the entrails, and the 2 kidneys and the fat that is on them by the loins, and the appendage on the liver which he removes with the kidneys. And the priest shall burn them on the altar as an offering made by fire to Yahuwah. It is a guilt offering. Every male among the priests eats it. It is eaten in the set-apart place. It is most set apart. The guilt offering is like the sin offering. There is one Torah for them both. The priest who makes atonement with it, it is his. And the priest who brings anyone's burnt offering, the skin of the burnt offering which he has brought is the priest. It is his. And every grain offering that is baked in the oven, and all that is prepared in the stewing pot or on the griddle, is the priest who brings it. It is his. And every grain offering mixed with oil or dry is for all the sons of Aaron, for all alike. And this is the Torah of the slaughtering of peace offerings, which is brought to Yahuwah. If he brings it for a thanksgiving, then he shall bring with the slaughtering of thanksgiving unleavened cakes mixed with oil, and unleavened thin cakes anointed with oil, or cakes of finely blended flour mixed with oil. Besides the cakes he brings as his offering leavened bread together with the slaughtering of thanksgiving of his peace offering. And from it he shall bring 1 cake from each offering as a contribution to Yahuwah. To the priest who sprinkles the blood of the peace offering, it is his. As for the flesh of the slaughtering of his peace offering for thanksgiving, it is eaten the same day it is offered. He does not leave any of it until morning. And if the offering he brings is a vow or a voluntary offering, it is eaten the same day that he brings his slaughtering, and what is left of it is eaten the next day. But whatever is left of the flesh of the slaughtering on the 3rd day is burned with fire. However, if any of the flesh of his peace offering is eaten at all on the 3rd day, it is not accepted. It is not reckoned to him who brings it. It is unclean to him, and the being who eats of it bears his crookedness. And the flesh that touches that which is unclean is not eaten. It is burned with fire. And as for the clean flesh, all who are clean eat of it. But the being who eats the flesh of the peace offering that belongs to Yahuwah, while he is unclean, that being shall be cut off from his people. And when a being who touches that which is unclean of the uncleanness of man, or of the uncleanness of beast, or of any unclean swarming creature, and shall eat the flesh of the peace offering that belongs to Yahuwah, that being shall be cut off from his people. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, Do not eat any fat of bull or sheep or goat, and the fat of a dead body and the fat of what is torn is used for any purpose, but you do not eat it at all. For whoever eats the fat of the beast of which men bring as an offering made by fire to Yahuwah, even the being who eats it shall be cut off from his people. And do not eat any blood in any of your dwellings of bird or of beast. Any being who eats any blood, even that being shall be cut off from his people. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, He who brings his peace offering to Yahuwah brings his offering to Yahuwah from the slaughtering of his peace offering. With his own hands he brings the offerings made by fire to Yahuwah. He brings the fat with the breast to be waved as a wave offering before Yahuwah. And the priest shall burn the fat on the altar, but the breast shall be Aaron's and his sons. And the right thigh you give to the priest as a contribution from your peace offerings. He among the sons of Aaron, who brings the blood of the peace offering and the fat, the right thigh is his for a portion. For the breast of the wave offering and the thigh of the contribution I have taken from the children of Israel from their peace offerings, and I give them to Aaron the priest and to his sons as a law forever from the children of Israel. This is the anointed portion for Aaron, and the anointed portion for his sons, from the offerings made by fire to Yahuwah, on the day when Moshe presented them to serve as priests to Yahuwah, which Yahuwah commanded to be given to them by the children of Israel, on the day that he anointed them, a law forever throughout their generations. This is the Torah of the burnt offering, of the grain offering, and of the sin offering, and of the guilt offering, and of the ordinations, and of the peace offering, which Yahuwah commanded Moshe on Mount Sinai, on the day when he commanded the children of Israel to bring their offerings to Yahuwah in the wilderness of Sinai. Leviticus chapter 8. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Take Aaron and his sons with him, and the garments, and the anointing oil, and the bull of the sin offering, and the 2 rams, and the basket of unleavened bread, and assemble all the congregation at the door of the tent of meeting. And Moshe did as Yahuwah commanded him, and the congregation was assembled at the door of the tent of meeting. And Moshe said to the congregation, This is the word Yahuwah commanded to be done. So Moshe brought Aaron and his sons and washed them with water, and put the long shirt on him, and girded him with the girdle, and dressed him in the robe, and put the shoulder garment on him, and girded him with the embroidered band of the shoulder garment, and with it tied the shoulder garment on him, and put the breastplate on him, and put the Urim and the Thummim and the breastplate, and put the turban on his head, and on the turban on its front he put the golden plate, the set-apart sign of dedication, as Yahuwah had commanded Moshe. And Moshe took the anointing oil and anointed the dwelling place and all that was in it, and set them apart. And he sprinkled some of it on the altar 7 times, and anointed the altar and all its utensils, and the basin and its base, to set them apart. And he poured some of the anointing oil on Aaron's head, and anointed him to set him apart. And Moshe brought the sons of Aaron, and put long shirts on them, and girded them with girdles, and put turbans on them, as Yahuwah had commanded Moshe. And he brought the bull for the sin offering, and Aaron and his sons laid their hands on the head of the bull for the sin offering, and it was slaughtered. And Moshe took the blood and put some on the horns of the altar all around with his finger, and cleansed the altar. And he poured the blood at the base of the altar, and set it apart to make atonement for it. And he took all the fat that was on the entrails, and the appendage on the liver, and the 2 kidneys with their fat. And Moshe burned them on the altar, and the bull, and its skin, and its flesh, and its dung he burned with fire outside the camp, as Yahuwah had commanded Moshe. And he brought the ram of the burnt offering, and Aaron and his sons laid their hands on the head of the ram, and it was slaughtered. And Moshe sprinkled the blood on the altar all around, and he cut the ram into pieces, and Moshe burned the head and the pieces and the fat. And he washed the entrails and the legs in water, and Moshe burned the entire ram on the altar. It was a burnt offering for a sweet fragrance, and an offering made by fire to Yahuwah, as Yahuwah had commanded Moshe. And he brought the second ram, the ram of ordination, and Aaron and his sons laid their hands on the head of the ram, and it was slaughtered. And Moshe took some of its blood and put it on the tip of Aaron's right ear, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. And he brought near the sons of Aaron, and Moshe put some of the blood on the tips of their right ears, and on the thumbs of their right hands, and on the big toes of their right feet. And Moshe sprinkled the blood on the altar all around, and took the fat and the fat tail, and all the fat that was on the entrails, and the appendage on the liver, and the 2 kidneys and their fat, and the right thigh. And from the basket of unleavened bread that was before Yahuwah, he took 1 unleavened cake, and a cake of bread anointed with oil, and 1 thin cake, and put them on the fat and on the right thigh, and placed all these in the hands of Aaron and in the hands of his sons, and waved them as a wave offering before Yahuwah. Moshe then took them from their hands and burned them on the altar on the burnt offering. They were ordinations for a sweet fragrance. It was an offering by fire to Yahuwah. And Moshe took the breast and waved it, a wave offering before Yahuwah. It was Moshe's portion of the ram of ordination, as Yahuwah had commanded Moshe. And Moshe took some of the anointing oil and some of the blood which was on the altar, and sprinkled it on Aaron, on his garments, and on his sons, and on the garments of his sons with him. And he set apart Aaron, his garments, and his sons, and the garments of his sons with him. And Moshe said to Aaron and his sons, Cook the flesh at the door of the tent of meeting, and eat it there with the bread that is in the basket of the ordinations, as I have commanded, saying, Aaron and his sons are to eat it. Then burn the rest of the flesh and the bread with fire. And do not go outside the door of the tent of meeting for 7 days, until the days of your ordination are completed, for he fills your hands for 7 days. Yahuwah has commanded to do as he has done this day, to make atonement for you. And stay at the door of the tent of meeting day and night for 7 days. And you shall guard the duty of Yahuwah and not die. For so I have been commanded. And Aaron and his sons did all the words that Yahuwah had commanded by the hand of Moshe. Leviticus chapter 9. And on the 8th day it came to be that Moshe called Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. And he said to Aaron, Take for yourself a young bull as a sin offering, and a ram as a burnt offering, a perfect one, and bring them before Yahuwah. And speak to the children of Israel, saying, Take a male goat as a sin offering, and a calf and a lamb, both a year old, perfect ones, as a burnt offering, and a bull and a ram as peace offerings to slaughter before Yahuwah, and a grain offering mixed with oil. For today Yahuwah shall appear to you. And they took what Moshe commanded before the tent of meeting, and all the congregation drew near and stood before Yahuwah. And Moshe said, This is the word which Yahuwah commanded you to do, so that the esteem of Yahuwah appears to you. And Moshe said to Aaron, Go to the altar and prepare your sin offering and your burnt offering, and make atonement for yourself and for the people, and make the offering of the people, and make atonement for them as Yahuwah has commanded. So Aaron came near to the altar and slaughtered the calf of the sin offering, which was for himself. And the sons of Aaron brought the blood to him, and he dipped his finger in the blood, and put it on the horns of the altar, and poured the blood at the base of the altar. And the fat and the kidneys, and the appendage on the liver of the sin offering he burned on the altar, as Yahuwah had commanded Moshe. And the flesh and the skin he burned with fire outside the camp. And he slaughtered the burnt offering, and the sons of Aaron presented to him the blood, which he sprinkled on the altar all around. And they presented the burnt offering to him with its pieces and head, and he burned them on the altar. And he washed the entrails and the legs, and burned them with the burnt offering on the altar. And he brought the people's offering, and took the goat, which was the sin offering for the people, and slaughtered it, and made it a sin offering like the first one. And he brought the burnt offering, and made it according to the right ruling. He also brought the grain offering, and filled his hand with it, and burned it on the altar, besides the burnt offering of the morning. And he slaughtered the bull and the ram as peace offerings, which were for the people. And Aaron's sons presented to him the blood which he sprinkled on the altar all around, and the fat from the bull and the ram, the fat tail and the covering and the kidneys and the appendage on the liver. And they placed the fat on the breast, and he burned the fat on the altar. But the breast and the right thigh Aaron waved as a wave offering before Yahuwah, as Moshe had commanded. Aaron then lifted up his hand toward the people and blessed them, and came down from making the sin offering and the burnt offering and the peace offerings. And Moshe and Aaron went into the tent of meeting and came out and blessed the people. And the esteem of Yahuwah appeared to all the people. And the fire came out from before Yahuwah and consumed the burnt offering and the fat on the altar. And all the people saw and cried aloud and fell on their faces. Leviticus chapter 10. And Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, each took his fire holder and put fire in it, and put incense on it, and brought strange fire before Yahuwah, which he had not commanded them. And fire came out from Yahuwah, and consumed them, and they died before Yahuwah. Then Moshe said to Aaron, This is what Yahuwah spoke, saying, By those who come near me, let me be set apart, and before all the people let me be esteemed. And Aaron was silent. And Moshe came to Mishael and to Elsaphan, the sons of Josiel, the uncle of Aaron, and said to them, Come near, take your brothers from before the set-apart place out of the camp. So they came near and took them by their long skirts out of the camp, as Moshe had said. And Moshe said to Aaron and to Eleazar and to Ithamar his sons, Do not unbind your heads, nor tear your garments, lest you die, and wrath come upon all the people. But let your brothers, all the house of Israel, beware the burning which Yahuwah has kindled. And do not go out from the door of the tent of meeting, lest you die, for the anointing oil of Yahuwah is upon you. And they did according to the word of Moshe. And Yahuwah spoke to Aaron, saying, Do not drink wine nor strong drink, you nor your sons with you, when you go into the tent of meeting, lest you die. A law forever throughout your generations, so as to make a distinction between the set apart and the profane, and between the unclean and the clean, and to teach the children of Israel all the laws which Yahuwah has spoken to them by the hand of Moshe. And Moshe spoke to Aaron and to Eleazar and Ithamar his sons who were left, Take the grain offering that is left over from the offerings made by fire to Yahuwah, and eat it without leaven beside the altar, for it is most set apart. And you shall eat it in a set apart place, because it is yours by law and your sons by law of the offerings made by fire to Yahuwah, for so I have been commanded. And the breast of the wave offering and the thigh of the contribution you eat in a clean place, you and your sons and your daughters with you. For they are yours by law, and your sons by law, which are given from the slaughterings of peace offerings of the children of Israel. The thigh of the contribution and the breast of the wave offering they bring with the offerings of fat made by fire, to bring as a wave offering before Yahuwah. And it shall be yours and your sons with you by a law forever, as Yahuwah has commanded. And Moshe diligently looked for the goat of the sin offering, and saw it was burned up. And he was wroth with Eleazar and Ithamar the sons of Aaron, who were left, saying, Why have you not eaten the sin offering in a set-apart place, since it is most set apart? And Elohim has given it to you to bear the crookedness of the congregation, to make atonement for them before Yahuwah. See, its blood was not brought inside the set-apart place. You should have eaten it without fail in a set-apart place, as I have commanded. And Aaron said to Moshe, See, today they have brought their sin offering and their burnt offering before Yahuwah, and matters like these have come to me. If I had eaten the sin offering today, would it have been right in the eyes of Yahuwah? And when Moshe heard that, it was good in his eyes. Leviticus chapter 11. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe and to Aaron, saying to them, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, These are the living creatures which you do eat among all the beasts that are on the earth. Whatever has a split hoof completely divided, chewing the cud among the beasts that you do eat. Only these you do not eat among those that chew the cud, or those that have a split hoof. The camel, because it chews the cud but does not have a split hoof, it is unclean to you. And the rabbit, because it chews the cud but does not have a split hoof, it is unclean to you. And the hare, because it chews the cud but does not have a split hoof, it is unclean to you. And the pig, though it has a split hoof completely divided, yet does not chew the cud, it is unclean to you. Their flesh you do not eat, and their carcasses you do not touch, they are unclean to you. These you do eat of all that are in the waters, any one that has fins and scales in the waters, in the seas or in the rivers, that you do eat. But all that have not fins and scales in the seas and in the waters, all that move in the waters, or any living creature which is in the waters, they are an abomination to you. They are an abomination to you. Of their flesh you do not eat, and their carcasses you abominate. All that have not fins or scales in the waters is an abomination to you. And these you do abominate among the birds. They are not eaten. They are an abomination. The eagle, and the vulture, and the black vulture, and the hawk, and the falcon after its kind, every raven after its kind, and the ostrich, and the nighthawk, and the seagull, and the hawk after its kind, and the little owl, and the fisher owl, and the great owl, and the white owl, and the pelican, and the carrion vulture, and the stork, the heron after its kind, and the hoopoe, and the bat, all flying insects that creep on all fours is an abomination to you. Only these you do eat of every flying insect that creeps on all fours, those which have joined legs above their feet with which to leap on the earth. These of them you do eat, the locust after its kind, and the destroying locust after its kind, and the cricket after its kind, and the grasshopper after its kind. But all other flying insects which have 4 feet is an abomination to you, and by these you are made unclean. Anyone touching the carcass of any of them is unclean until evening. And anyone picking up part of the carcass of any of them has to wash his garments, and shall be unclean until evening. Every beast that has a split hoof not completely divided, or does not chew the cud, is unclean to you. Anyone who touches their carcass is unclean. And whatever goes on its paws among all the creatures that go on all fours, those are unclean to you. Anyone who touches their carcass is unclean until evening. And he who picks up their carcass has to wash his garments, and shall be unclean until evening. They are unclean to you. And these are unclean to you among the creeping creatures that creep on the earth, the mole, and the mouse, and the tortoise after its kind, and the gecko, and the land crocodile, and the sand reptile, and the sand lizard, and the chameleon. These are unclean to you among all that creep. Anyone who touches them when they are dead becomes unclean until evening. And whatever any of them in its dead state falls upon becomes unclean, whether it is any wooden object or garment or skin or sack, any object in which work is done, it is put in water, and it shall be unclean until evening, then it shall be clean. Any earthen vessel into which any of them falls, whatever is in it becomes unclean, and you break it. Any of the food which might be eaten on which water comes becomes unclean, and any drink which might be drunk from it becomes unclean. And on whatever any of their carcass falls becomes unclean. An oven or cooking range, it is broken down. They are unclean, and are unclean to you. But a fountain or a well, a collection of water, is clean. But whatever touches their carcass is unclean. And when any of their carcass falls on any planting seed which is to be sown, it is clean. But when any water is put on the seed, and any part of any such carcass falls on it, it is unclean to you. And when any of the beasts which are yours for food dies, he who touches its carcass becomes unclean until evening. And he who eats of its carcass has to wash his garments, and shall be unclean until evening. And he who picks up its carcass has to wash his garments, and shall be unclean until evening. And every creeping creature that creeps on the earth is an abomination. It is not eaten. Whatever crawls on its stomach, and whatever goes on all fours, and whatever has many feet among all creeping creatures that creep on the earth, these you do not eat, for they are an abomination. Do not make yourselves abominable with any creeping creature that creeps, and do not make yourselves unclean with them, lest you be defiled by them. For I am Yahuwah, your Elohim, and you shall set yourselves apart, and you shall be set apart. For I am set apart, and do not defile yourselves with any creeping creature that creeps on the earth. For I am Yahuwah, who is bringing you up out of the land of Mizraim, to be your Elohim, and you shall be set apart, for I am set apart. This is the Torah of the beasts and the birds, and every living creature that moves in the waters, and of every creature that creeps on the earth, to make a distinction between the unclean and the clean, and between the living creature that is eaten and the living creature that is not eaten. Leviticus chapter 12. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, When a woman has conceived, and has given birth to a male child, then she shall be unclean 7 days, as in the days of her monthly separation she is unclean. And on the 8th day the flesh of his foreskin is circumcised, and she remains in the blood of her cleansing 33 days. She does not touch whatever is set apart, and she does not come into the set apart place until the days of her cleansing are completed. But if she gives birth to a female child, then she shall be unclean for 2 weeks, as in her monthly separation, and she remains in the blood of her cleansing for 66 days. And when the days of her cleansing are completed, for a son or for a daughter, she brings to the priest a lamb a year old as a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a turtle dove as a sin offering to the door of the tent of meeting. And he shall bring it before Yahuwah, and make atonement for her, and she shall be cleansed from the flow of her blood. This is the Torah for her who has given birth to a male or a female. And if she is not able to bring a lamb, then she shall bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, one as a burnt offering and the other as a sin offering. And the priest shall make atonement for her, and she shall be clean. Just help me to understand. Leviticus chapter 13. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe and to Aaron, saying, When a man has on the skin of his body a swelling, a scab, or a bright spot, and it shall become on the skin of his body like a leprous infection, then he shall be brought to Aaron the priest, or to one of his sons the priest. And the priest shall look at the infection on the skin of the body. And if the hair on the infection has turned white, and the infection appears to be deeper than the skin of his body, it is a leprous infection, and the priest shall look at him and pronounce him unclean. But if the bright spot is white on the skin of his body and does not appear to be deeper than the skin, and his hair has not turned white, then the priest shall shut up the infected one 7 days. And the priest shall look at him on the 7th day and see. If the infection appears to be as it was, and the infection has not spread on the skin, then the priest shall shut him up another 7 days. And the priest shall look at him again on the 7th day and see. If the infection has darkened and the infection has not spread on the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is a scab, and he shall wash his garments and be clean. But if the scab spreads further over the skin, after he has been seen by the priest for his cleansing, he shall be seen by the priest again. And the priest shall look and see if the scab has spread on the skin. Then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is leprosy. When the infection of leprosy is on a man, then he shall be brought to the priest, and the priest shall look and see if the swelling on the skin is white, and it has turned the hair white, and there is a spot of raw flesh in the swelling. It is an old leprosy on the skin of his body, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean. He does not shut him up, for he is unclean. And if leprosy breaks out all over the skin, and the leprosy shall cover all the skin of the infected one, from his head to his foot, wherever the priest looks, then the priest shall look and see if the leprosy has covered all his body. He shall pronounce the infected one clean. It has all turned white. He is clean. But the day raw flesh appears on him, he is unclean. And the priest shall look at the raw flesh and pronounce him to be unclean. The raw flesh is unclean. It is leprosy. Or when the raw flesh changes and turns white again, he shall come to the priest, and the priest shall look at him and see if the infection has turned white. Then the priest shall pronounce the infected one clean. He is clean. And when the body has a boil in the skin and it is healed, and in the place of the boil there comes a white swelling or a bright spot, reddish white, then it shall be seen by the priest. And the priest shall look and see if it appears deeper than the skin, and his hair has turned white. The priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous infection which has broken out of the boil. But if the priest looks at it and sees no white hairs in it, and it is not deeper than the skin, but has faded, then the priest shall shut him up 7 days. And if it has spread further over the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous infection. But if the bright spot stays in its place, it has not spread. It is the scar of the boil, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. Or when the body receives a burn on its skin by fire, and the raw flesh of the burn shall become a bright spot, reddish white or white, then the priest shall look at it and see if the hair of the bright spot has turned white, and it appears deeper than the skin. It is leprosy broken out in the burn, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous infection. But if the priest looks at it and sees there are no white hairs in the bright spot, and it is not deeper than the skin but has faded, then the priest shall shut him up 7 days. And the priest shall look at him on the 7th day. If it spreads further over the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous infection. But if the bright spot stays in its place and has not spread on the skin, but has faded, it is a swelling from the burn. And the priest shall pronounce him clean, for it is the scar from the burn. And when a man or a woman has an infection on the head or in the beard, then the priest shall look at the infection and see if it appears deeper than the skin, and there is thin yellow hair in it. Then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is an eruption, a leprosy of the head or beard. But when the priest looks at the infection of the eruption and sees that it does not appear deeper than the skin, and there is no black hair in it, then the priest shall shut up the one with the infection of the eruption 7 days. And on the 7th day the priest shall look at the infection and see if the eruption has not spread, and there is no yellow hair in it, and the eruption does not appear deeper than the skin, then he shall shave himself. But the eruption he does not shave, and the priest shall shut up the one with the eruption another 7 days. And on the 7th day the priest shall look at the eruption and see. If the eruption has not spread over the skin and does not appear deeper than the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him clean, and he shall wash his garments, and he shall be clean. But if the eruption spreads further over the skin after his cleansing, then the priest shall look at him and see. If the eruption has spread over the skin, the priest need not seek for yellow hair. He is unclean. But if the eruption appears to have stayed and there is black hair grown up in it, the eruption has healed. He is clean, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. And when a man or a woman has bright spots on the skin of the body, white, bright spots, then the priest shall look and see. If the bright spots on the skin of the body are dull white, it is a white spot that grows on the skin. It is clean. And when a man loses the hair of his head, he is bald, he is clean. And if the hair has fallen from his forehead, he has bald on the forehead, he is clean. And when there is on the bald head or bald forehead a reddish white infection, it is leprosy breaking out on his bald head or his bald forehead. And the priest shall look at it and see if the swelling of the infection is reddish white on his bald head or on his bald forehead, as the appearance of leprosy on the skin of the body. He is a leprous man, he is unclean. The priest shall pronounce him unclean without fail. His infection is on his head. As for the leper who has the infection, his garments are torn and his head is uncovered, and he has to cover his upper lip and cry, "Unclean, unclean." He is unclean. All the days he has the infection, he is unclean. He is unclean. And he dwells alone. His dwelling place is outside the camp. And when a garment has an infection of leprosy in it, in a woolen garment or in a linen garment, or in the warp or in the welt or linen or wool or in leather or in any leather work, and the infection shall be greenish or reddish in the garment or in the leather or in the warp or in the welt or in any leather object, it is an infection of leprosy and shall be shown to the priest. And the priest shall look at the infection and shut up the infected one 7 days. And he shall look at the infection on the 7th day. And when the infection has spread in the garment or in the warp or in the welt or in the leather, in any leather work, the infection is an active leprosy. It is unclean. And he shall burn that garment or the warp or the welt in wool or in linen or any leather object in which the infection is, for it is an active leprosy. It is burned with fire. But if the priest looks and sees that the infection has not spread in the garment, or in the warp, or in the welt, or in any leather object, then the priest shall give command, and they shall wash that in which the infection is, and he shall shut it up another 7 days. And the priest shall look at the infection after it has been washed and see if the infection has not changed its appearance, though the infection has not spread, it is unclean, and burn it in the fire. It is eaten away in its inside or outside. And if the priest shall look and see that the infection has faded after washing it, then he shall tear it out of the garment, or out of the warp, or out of the welt, or out of the leather. And if it is still seen in the garment, or in the warp, or in the welt, or in any leather object, it is a spreading infection. Burn it with fire, that in which the infection is. And if you wash the garment or the warp or the welt or any leather object, if the infection has disappeared from it, then it shall be washed a second time and shall be clean. This is the Torah of the infection of leprosy in a garment of wool or linen, or in the warp, or in the welt, or in any leather object, to pronounce it clean or to pronounce it unclean. Leviticus chapter 14. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, This shall be the Torah of the leper for the day of his cleansing. He shall be brought to the priest. And the priest shall go out of the camp, and the priest shall look and see if the leprosy is healed in the leper. Then the priest shall command, and he shall take for him who is to be cleansed 2 live and clean birds, and cedar wood, and scarlet, and hyssop. And the priest shall command, and he shall kill one of the birds in an earthen vessel over running water. Let him take the live bird, and the cedar wood, and the scarlet, and the hyssop, and dip them and the live bird in the blood of the bird that was killed over the running water. And he shall sprinkle it 7 times on him who is to be cleansed from the leprosy, and shall pronounce him clean, and shall let the live bird loose in the open field. And he who is to be cleansed shall wash his garments, and shall shave off all his hair, and wash himself in water, and shall be clean. Then after that he comes into the camp, but shall stay outside his tent 7 days. And on the 7th day it shall be that he shaves all the hair off his head, and his beard and his eyebrows, even all his hair he shaves off. And he shall wash his garments and wash his body in water, and shall be clean. And on the 8th day he takes 2 male lambs, perfect ones, and 1 ewe lamb, a year old, a perfect one, and 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil as a grain offering, and 1 log of oil. And the priest who is cleansing shall present the man who is to be cleansed with these offerings before Yahuwah at the door of the tent of meeting. And the priest shall take 1 male lamb and bring it as a guilt offering, and a log of oil, and wave them as a wave offering before Yahuwah. And he shall slaughter the lamb in the place where he slaughters the sin offering and the burnt offering, in a set-apart place. For the guilt offering, like the sin offering, belongs to the priest. It is most set apart. And the priest shall take some of the blood of the guilt offering, and the priest shall put it on the tip of the right ear of him who is to be cleansed, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. And the priest shall take some of the log of oil, and pour it into the palm of his own left hand. And the priest shall dip his right finger in the oil that is in his left hand, and shall sprinkle some of the oil with his finger 7 times before Yahuwah. And of the rest of the oil in his hand, the priest puts some on the tip of the right ear of him who is to be cleansed, and on the toe of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, on the blood of the guilt offering. And the rest of the oil that is in the priest's hand he puts on the head of him who is to be cleansed, and the priest shall make atonement for him before Yahuwah. And the priest shall make the sin offering and make atonement for him who is to be cleansed from his uncleanness. Then afterwards he slaughters the burnt offering, and the priest shall offer the burnt offering and the grain offering on the altar, and the priest shall make atonement for him, and he shall be clean. But if he is poor and is unable to afford it, then he shall take 1 male lamb as a guilt offering to be waved, to make atonement for him, and 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil as a grain offering, and a log of oil, and 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, such as he is able to afford, and 1 shall be a sin offering, and the other a burnt offering. And he shall bring them to the priest on the 8th day for his cleansing to the door of the tent of meeting before Yahuwah. And the priest shall take the lamb of the guilt offering and the log of oil, and the priest shall wave them as a wave offering before Yahuwah. And he shall slaughter the lamb of the guilt offering, and the priest shall take some of the blood of the guilt offering and put it on the tip of the right ear of him who is to be cleansed, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. Then the priest pours some of the oil into the palm of his own left hand, and the priest shall sprinkle with his right finger some of the oil that is in his left hand 7 times before Yahuwah. And the priest shall put some of the oil that is in his hand on the tip of the right ear of him who is to be cleansed, and on the thumb of the right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, on the place of the blood of the guilt offering. And the rest of the oil that is in the priest's hand he puts on the head of him who is to be cleansed, to make atonement for him before Yahuwah. And he shall prepare 1 of the turtle doves or young pigeons, such as he is able to afford, that which he is able to afford, the one as a sin offering, and the other as a burnt offering with a grain offering. And the priest shall make atonement for him who is to be cleansed before Yahuwah. This is the Torah for one who had an infection of leprosy, who is unable to afford for his cleansing. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe into Aaron, saying, When you come into the land of Canaan, which I am giving you as a possession, and I put a plague of leprosy in a house in the land of your possession, then shall the one who owns the house come and inform the priest, saying, it seems to me that there is some plague in the house. And the priest shall command, and they shall empty the house before the priest goes in to look at the plague, so that all that is in the house is not made unclean. And after that the priest goes in to look at the house, and he shall look at the plague and see. If the plague is on the walls of the house with sunken places, greenish or reddish, which appears to be deep in the wall, then the priest shall go out of the house to the door of the house and shut up the house 7 days. And the priest shall come again on the 7th day and look, and see if the plague has spread on the walls of the house. Then the priest shall command, and they shall remove the stones with the plague in them. And they shall throw them outside the city into an unclean place, while he lets the house be scraped inside all around, and the dust that they scrape off they shall pour out in an unclean place outside the city. And they shall take other stones and put them in the place of those stones, and take other mortar and plaster the house. And if the plague comes back and breaks out in the house, after he has removed the stones, after he has scraped the house, and after it is plastered, then the priest shall come and look and see if the plague has spread in the house. It is an active leprosy in the house, it is unclean. And he shall break down the house, its stones and its timber, and all the plaster of the house, and he shall bring them outside the city to an unclean place. And he who goes into the house all the days while it is shut up becomes unclean until evening. And he who lies down in the house has to wash his garments, and he who eats in the house has to wash his garments. However, if the priest indeed comes in and looks at it and sees that the plague has not spread in the house after the house was plastered, then the priest shall pronounce the house clean, because the plague is healed. And to cleanse the house he shall take 2 birds, and cedar wood, and scarlet, and hyssop. And he shall kill one of the birds in an earthen vessel over running water. And he shall take the cedar wood, and the hyssop, and the scarlet, and the live bird, and dip them in the blood of the slain bird and in the running water, and shall sprinkle the house 7 times. He shall thus cleanse the house with the blood of the bird, and the running water, and the live bird, and with the cedar wood, and with the hyssop, and with the scarlet. And he shall let the live bird loose outside the city in the open field, and shall make atonement for the house, and it shall be clean. This is the Torah for any infection of leprosy and eruption, and for leprosy of a garment and of a house, and for a swelling, and for a scab, and for a bright spot, to teach when it is unclean and when it is clean. This is the Torah of leprosy. Leviticus chapter 15. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe and to Aaron, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, When any man has a discharge from his flesh, his discharge is unclean. And this is his uncleanness in regard to his discharge, whether his flesh runs with his discharge, or his flesh is stopped up by his discharge. It is his uncleanness. Any bed becomes unclean on which he who has a discharge lies, and any object on which he sits becomes unclean. And anyone who touches his bed has to wash his garments, and shall bathe in water, and be unclean until evening. And he who sits on any object on which he who has the discharge sat has to wash his garments, and shall bathe in water, and be unclean until evening. And he who touches the flesh of him who has the discharge has to wash his garments, and shall bathe in water, and shall be unclean until evening. And when he who has the discharge spits on him who is clean, then he shall wash his garments, and shall bathe in water, and be unclean until evening. Any saddle on which he who has the discharge rides becomes unclean. And whoever touches any of that which was under him is unclean until evening. And he who is carrying them up has to wash his garments, and shall bathe in water, and be unclean until evening. And anyone whom he who has a discharge touches without rinsing his hands in water shall wash his garments, and bathe in water, and be unclean until evening. And the earthen vessel which he who has a discharge touches has to be broken, and every wooden vessel has to be rinsed in water. And when he who has a discharge is cleansed of his discharge, then he shall count for himself 7 days for his cleansing, and shall wash his garments, and shall bathe his flesh in running water, and be clean. And on the 8th day he takes for himself 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, and shall come before Yahuwah to the door of the tent meeting, and shall give them to the priest. And the priest shall prepare them, the one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering. And the priest shall make atonement for him before Yahuwah because of his discharge. And when a man has an emission of semen, then he shall wash all his flesh in water, and be unclean until evening. And any garment and any leather on which there is semen shall also be washed with water, and be unclean until evening. And when a woman lies with a man, and there is an emission of semen, they both shall bathe in water, and be unclean until evening. And when a woman has a discharge, and the discharge from her flesh is blood, she has to be in her separation for 7 days. And whoever touches her is unclean until evening. And whatever she lies on during her separation is unclean, and whatever she sits on is unclean. And anyone who touches her bed has to wash his garments, and shall bathe in water, and be unclean until evening. And whoever touches any object that she sat on has to wash his garments, and shall bathe in water, and be unclean until evening. And if it is on the bed or on any object on which she sits, when he touches it, he is unclean until evening. And if any man lies with her at all, and her monthly flow is on him, he shall be unclean 7 days, and any bed he lies on is unclean. And when a woman has a discharge of blood for many days, other than at the time of her monthly separation, or when she discharges beyond her usual time of monthly separation, all the days of her unclean discharge shall be as the days of her monthly separation. She is unclean. Any bed on which she lies all the days of her discharge is to her as the bed of her monthly separation. And whatever she sits on is unclean as the uncleanness of her monthly separation. And anyone who touches them is unclean, and shall wash his garments, and shall bathe in water, and be unclean until evening. But if she is cleansed of her discharge, then she shall count for herself 7 days, and after that she is clean. And on the 8th day she takes for herself 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, and shall bring them to the priest to the door of the tent of meeting. And the priest shall prepare the one as a sin offering, and the other as a burnt offering, and the priest shall make atonement for her before Yahuwah for the discharge of her uncleanness. Thus you shall separate the children of Israel from their uncleanness, lest they die in their uncleanness when they defile my dwelling place, which is in their midst. This is the Torah for one who has a discharge, and for him who emits semen and is unclean thereby, and for her who is sick in her monthly separation, and for one who has a discharge, either man or woman, and for him who lies with an unclean woman. Leviticus chapter 16. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe after the death of the 2 sons of Aaron, as they drew near before Yahuwah and died. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, Speak to Aaron your brother not to come in at all times to the set-apart place inside the veil before the lid of atonement, which is on the ark, lest he die, because I appear in the cloud above the lid of atonement. With this Aaron should come into the set-apart place with the blood of a young bull as a sin offering, and of a ram as a burnt offering. He shall put on the set-apart linen long shirt with linen trousers on his flesh, and gird himself with a linen girdle, and be dressed with the linen turban. They are set-apart garments. And he shall bathe his body in water, and shall put them on. And from the congregation of the children of Israel he takes 2 male goats as a sin offering, and 1 ram as a burnt offering. And Aaron shall bring the bull as a sin offering, which is for himself, and make atonement for himself and for his house. And he shall take the 2 goats and let them stand before Yahuwah at the door of the tent of meeting. And Aaron shall cast lots for the 2 goats, 1 lot for Yahuwah, and the other lot for Azazel. And Aaron shall bring the goat on which the lot for Yahuwah fell, and shall prepare it as a sin offering. But the goat on which the lot of Azazel fell is caused to stand alive before Yahuwah, to make atonement upon it, to send it into the wilderness to Azazel. And Aaron shall bring the bull of the sin offering, which is for himself, and make atonement for himself and for his house, and shall slaughter the bull as the sin offering, which is for himself, and shall take a fire holder filled with burning coals of fire from the altar before Yahuwah, with his hands filled with sweet incense beaten fine, and shall bring it inside the veil. And he shall put the incense on the fire before Yahuwah, and the cloud of incense shall cover the lid of atonement which is on the witness, lest he die. And he shall take some of the blood of the bull and sprinkle it with his finger on the lid of atonement on the east side. Also in front of the lid of atonement he sprinkles some of the blood with his finger 7 times. And he shall slaughter the goat of the sin offering which is for the people, and shall bring its blood inside the veil, and shall do with that blood as he did with the blood of the bull, and sprinkle it on the lid of atonement and in front of the lid of atonement. And he shall make atonement for the set-apart place, because of the uncleanness of the children of Israel, and because of their transgressions and all their sins. And so he does for the tent of meeting, which is dwelling with them in the midst of their uncleanness. And no man should be in the tent of meeting when he goes in to make atonement in the set-apart place until he comes out. And he shall make atonement for himself and for his household and for all the assembly of Israel. And he shall go out to the altar that is before Yahuwah to make atonement for it. And he shall take some of the blood of the bull and some of the blood of the goat, and put it on the horns of the altar all around. And he shall sprinkle some of the blood on it with his finger 7 times, and cleanse it, and set it apart from the uncleanness of the children of Israel. And when he has finished atoning for the set-apart place in the tent of meeting and the altar, he shall bring the live goat. Then Aaron shall lay both his hands on the head of the live goat, and shall confess over it all the crookednesses of the children of Israel, and all their transgressions and all their sins, and shall put them on the head of the goat, and shall send it away into the wilderness by the hand of a fit man. And the goat shall bear on itself all their crookednesses to a lamb cut off. Thus he shall send the goat away into the wilderness. Aaron shall then come into the tent of meeting, and shall take off the linen garments which he put on when he went into the set-apart place, and shall leave them there. And he shall bathe his body in water in the set-apart place, and shall put on his garments, and shall come out and prepare his burnt offering and the burnt offering of the people, and make atonement for himself and for the people, and burn the fat of the sin offering on the altar. And he who sent away the goat to Azazel washes his garments, and shall bathe his body in water, and afterward he comes into the camp. And the bull for the sin offering and the goat for the sin offering, whose blood was brought in to make atonement in the set-apart place, is brought outside the camp. And they shall burn their skins and their flesh and their dung with fire. And he who burns them washes his garments, and shall bathe his body in water. And afterward he comes into the camp. And this shall be for you a law forever. In the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, you afflict your beings and do no work, the native or the stranger who sojourns among you. For on that day he makes atonement for you, to cleanse you, to be clean from all your sins before Yahuwah. It is a Sabbath of rest for you, and you shall afflict your beings, a law forever. And the priest who is anointed and ordained to serve as priest in his father's place shall make atonement, and shall put on the linen garments, the set apart garments, and he shall make atonement for the most set apart place, and make atonement for the tent of meeting, and for the altar, and make atonement for the priests, and for all the people of the assembly. And this shall be for you a law forever, to make atonement for the children of Israel for all their sins once a year. And he did as Yahuwah commanded Moshe. Leviticus chapter 17. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to Aaron, to his sons, and to all the children of Israel, and say to them, This is the blood which Yahuwah has commanded, saying, Any man from the house of Israel who slaughters a bull or a lamb or a goat in the camp, or who slaughters it outside the camp, and does not bring it to the door of the tent of meeting, to bring an offering to Yahuwah before the dwelling place of Yahuwah, blood guilt is reckoned to that man. He has shed blood, and that man shall be cut off from among his people, in order that the children of Israel bring their slaughterings which they slaughter in the open field, and they shall bring them to Yahuwah at the door of the tent of meeting to the priest, and slaughter them as peace offerings to Yahuwah. And the priest shall sprinkle the blood on the altar of Yahuwah at the door of the tent of meeting, and shall burn the fat for a sweet fragrance to Yahuwah. And let them no longer slaughter their slaughterings to demons, after whom they whored. This is a law forever for them throughout their generations. And say to them, Any man of the house of Israel, or of the strangers who sojourn among you, who offers a burnt offering or slaughtering, and does not bring it to the door of the tent of meeting to do it to Yahuwah, that man shall be cut off from among his people. And any man of the house of Israel, or of the strangers who sojourn among you, who eats any blood, I shall set my face against that being who eats blood, and shall cut him off from among his people. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make atonement for your lives, for it is the blood that makes atonement for the life. Therefore I said to the children of Israel, No being among you eats blood, nor does any stranger who sojourns among you eat blood. And any man from the children of Israel, or from the strangers who sojourn among you, who hunts and catches any beast or bird which is eaten, shall pour out its blood and cover it with dust. For it is the life of all flesh. Its blood is for its life. And I said to the children of Israel, Do not eat the blood of any flesh, for the life of all flesh is its blood. Anyone eating it is cut off. And any being who eats a carcass or what was torn by a beast, be he a native or a stranger, he shall wash his garments and bathe in water, and shall be clean until evening. Then he shall be clean. And if he does not wash or bathe his body, then he shall bear his crookedness. Leviticus chapter 18. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, I am Yahuwah your Elohim. Do not do as they do in the land of Mizraim, where you dwelt, and do not do as they do in the land of Canaan, where I am bringing you, and do not walk in their laws. Do my right rulings and guard my laws to walk in them. I am Yahuwah your Elohim. And you shall guard my laws and my right rulings, which a man does and lives by them. I am Yahuwah. No one is to approach anyone of his own flesh to uncover his nakedness. I am Yahuwah. The nakedness of your father or the nakedness of your mother you do not uncover. She is your mother. You do not uncover her nakedness. The nakedness of your father's wife you do not uncover. It is your father's nakedness. The nakedness of your sister, the daughter of your father, or the daughter of your mother, whether born at home or elsewhere, their nakedness you do not uncover. The nakedness of your son's daughter or your daughter's daughter, their nakedness you do not uncover, for theirs is your own nakedness. The nakedness of your father's wife's daughter, brought forth by your father, she is your sister, you do not uncover her nakedness. The nakedness of your father's sister you do not uncover, she is your father's flesh. The nakedness of your mother's sister you do not uncover, for she is your mother's flesh. The nakedness of your father's brother you do not uncover. You do not approach his wife, she is your aunt. The nakedness of your daughter-in-law you do not uncover, she is your son's wife. You do not uncover her nakedness. The nakedness of your brother's wife you do not uncover, it is your brother's nakedness. The nakedness of a woman and her daughter you do not uncover, nor do you take her son's daughter or her daughter's daughter to uncover her nakedness. They are her relatives. It is wickedness. And do not take a woman as a rival to her sister to uncover her nakedness while the other is alive. And do not approach a woman to uncover her nakedness in her monthly separation of uncleanness. And do not have intercourse with the wife of your neighbor to defile yourself with her. And do not give any of your offspring to pass through to Moloch. And do not profane the name of your Elohim. I am Yahuwah. And do not lie with a male as with a woman. It is an abomination. And do not have intercourse with any beast to defile yourself with it. And a woman does not stand before a beast to mate with it. It is a perversion. Do not defile yourselves with all these, for by all these the nations are defiled, which I am driving out before you. Thus the land became defiled. Therefore I punished it for its crookedness, and the land vomited out its inhabitants. But you shall guard my laws and my right rulings, and not do any of these abominations, the native nor stranger who sojourns among you. Because the men of the land who were before you have done all these abominations, and thus the land became defiled. So let not the land vomit you out by defiling it, as it vomited out the nations that were before you. For whoever does any of these abominations, those beings who do them shall be cut off from among their people. And you shall guard my charge so as not to do any of these abominable practices which were done before you, so as not to defile yourselves by them. I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. Leviticus chapter 19. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to all the congregation of the children of Israel, and say to them, Be set apart, for I, Yahuwah, your Elohim, am set apart. Each one of you should fear his mother and his father, and guard my Sabbaths. I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. Do not turn to idols, and do not make for yourselves molded mighty ones. I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. And when you bring a peace offering to Yahuwah, bring it for your acceptance. It is eaten the same day you slaughter it, and on the next day. And that which is left on the third day is burned with fire. So if it is eaten at all on the third day, it is abominable, it is not accepted. And he who eats it bears his crookedness, because he has profaned the set-apart offering of Yahuwah, and that being shall be cut off from his people. And when you reap the harvest of your land, do not completely reap the corners of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. And do not glean your vineyard, or gather every grape of your vineyard. Leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. Do not steal, do not lie, do not deceive one another, and do not swear falsely by my name, and so profane the name of your Elohim. I am Yahuwah. Do not oppress your neighbor or rob him. The wages of him who is hired is not to remain with you all night until morning. Do not curse the deaf or put a stumbling block before the blind, but fear your Elohim. I am Yahuwah. Do no unrighteousness in right ruling. Do not be partial to the poor or favor the face of the great, but rightly rule your neighbor in righteousness. Do not go slandering among your people. Do not stand against the blood of your neighbor. I am Yahuwah. Do not hate your brother in your heart. Reprove your neighbor for certain, and bear no sin because of him. Do not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the children of your people. And you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahuwah. Guard my laws. Do not let your livestock mate with another kind. Do not sow your field with mixed seed. And do not put a garment woven of two sorts of thread upon you. And when a man has intercourse with a woman who is a female servant, engaged to a man, and who has not at all been ransomed nor redeemed, there should be an inquiry. But they are not put to death, because she was not free. And he shall bring his guilt offering to Yahuwah to the door of the tent of meeting, a ram as a guilt offering. And the priest shall make atonement for him with the ram of the guilt offering before Yahuwah. For his sin which he has done, and the sin which he has sinned, shall be forgiven him. And when you come into the land, and have planted all kinds of trees for food, then you shall reckon their fruit is uncircumcised. For 3 years it is as uncircumcised to you, it is not eaten. And in the 4th year all its fruit is set apart, praises to Yahuwah. And in the 5th year you eat its fruit, so that it increases its yield to you. I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. Do not eat meat with the blood. Do not practice divination or magic. Do not round the corner of your head, nor destroy the corner of your beard. And do not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor put tattoo marks on you. I am Yahuwah. Do not profane your daughter by making her a whore, so that the land does not whore, and the land becomes filled with wickedness. Guard my Sabbaths, and reverence my set-apart place. I am Yahuwah. Do not turn to mediums, and do not seek after spiritists, to be defiled by them. I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. Rise up before the gray-headed, and you shall favor the face of an old man, and shall fear your Elohim. I am Yahuwah. And when a stranger sojourns with you in your land, do not oppress him. Let the stranger who dwells among you be to you as the native among you, and you shall love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Mizraim. I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. Do no unrighteousness and right ruling in measurement of length and weight, or in measuring liquids. Have right scales, right weights, a right ephah, and a right hin. I am Yahuwah, your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mizraim. And you shall guard all my laws and all my right rulings, and do them. I am Yahuwah. Leviticus chapter 20. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Say to the children of Israel, Any man of the children of Israel, or of the strangers who sojourn in Israel, who gives any of his offspring to Moloch, shall certainly be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones. And I shall set my face against that man, and shall cut him off from the midst of his people, because he has given of his offspring to Moloch, so as to defile my set-apart place, and to profane my set-apart name. And if the people of the land at all hide their eyes from the man, as he gives any of his offspring to Moloch, and they do not kill him, then I shall set my face against that man and against his clan, and shall cut him off. And all who go whoring after him, even go whoring after Moloch, from the midst of their people. And the being who turns to mediums and to spiritists, to go whoring after them, I shall set my face against that being, and cut him off from the midst of his people. And you shall set yourselves apart, and shall be set apart, for I am Yahuwah your Elohim. And you shall guard my laws and do them. I am Yahuwah, who sets you apart. For everyone who curses his father or his mother shall certainly be put to death. He has cursed his father or his mother. His blood is on him. And a man who commits adultery with the wife of another man, who commits adultery with the wife of his neighbor, the adulterer and the adulteress shall certainly be put to death. And a man who lies with the wife of his father has uncovered the nakedness of his father. Both of them shall certainly be put to death. Their blood is upon them. And a man who lies with his daughter-in-law, both of them shall certainly be put to death. They have made confusion, their blood is upon them. And a man who lies with a male as he lies with a woman, both of them have done an abomination. They shall certainly be put to death. Their blood is upon them. And a man who marries a woman and her mother, it is wickedness, they are burned with fire, both he and they, that there be no wickedness in your midst. And a man who has intercourse with a beast, he shall certainly be put to death. And the beast you kill. And a woman who approaches any beast and mates with it, you shall kill the woman and the beast. They shall certainly be put to death. Their blood is upon them. And a man who takes his sister, his father's daughter, or his mother's daughter, and sees her nakedness, and she sees his nakedness, it is wickedness, and they shall be cut off before the eyes of their people. He has uncovered his sister's nakedness. He bears his crookedness. And a man who lies with a woman during her sickness and uncovers her nakedness, he has laid bare her flow, and she has uncovered the flow of her blood. Both of them shall be cut off from the midst of their people. And do not uncover the nakedness of your mother's sister, nor of your father's sister, for that is laying bare one's own flesh. They bear their crookedness. And a man who lies with his uncle's wife, he has uncovered his uncle's nakedness. They bear their sin, they die childless. And a man who takes his brother's wife, it is uncleanness. He has uncovered his brother's nakedness. They are childless. And you shall guard all my laws and all my right rulings and do them, so that the land where I am bringing you to dwell does not vomit you out. And do not walk in the laws of the nation which I am driving out before you, for they do all these, and therefore I loathe them. But I say to you, you are going to possess this land, and I myself give it to you to possess it, a land flowing with milk and honey. I am Yahuwah, your Elohim, who has separated you from the peoples. And you shall make a distinction between clean beasts and unclean, and between unclean birds and clean. And do not make yourselves abominable by beast or by bird, or whatever creeps on the ground, which I have separated from you as unclean. And you shall be set apart to me, for I, Yahuwah, am set apart, and have separated you from the peoples to be mine. And a man or a woman in whom there is a medium, or who are spiritists, shall certainly be put to death. They are to stone them with stones. Their blood is upon them. Leviticus chapter 21. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, Speak to the priests, the sons of Aaron, and say to them, No one is to be defiled for the dead among his people, except for his relatives who are nearest to him, for his mother, and for his father, and for his son, and for his daughter, and for his brother, and for his maiden sister who is near to him, who has had no husband. For her he is defiled. A leader does not defile himself among his people to profane himself. They do not make any bald place on their heads, and they do not shave the corner of their beard, and they do not make a cutting in their flesh. They are set apart to their Elohim, and do not profane the name of their Elohim, for they bring the offerings of Yahuwah made by fire, and the bread of their Elohim, and shall be set apart. They do not take a woman who is a whore or a defiled woman, and they do not take a woman put away from her husband, for he is set apart for his Elohim. And you shall set him apart, for he brings the bread of your Elohim. He is set apart to you, for I, Yahuwah, setting you apart, am set apart. And when the daughter of any priest profanes herself by whoring, she profanes the father. She is burned with fire. And the high priest among his brothers, on whose head the anointing oil was poured, and who is ordained to wear the garments, does not unbind his head, nor tear his garments, nor come near any dead body, nor defile himself for his father or his mother, nor go out of the set-apart place, nor profane the set-apart place of his Elohim. For the sign of dedication of the anointing oil of his Elohim is upon him. I am Yahuwah. And let him take a wife in her maidenhood, a widow, or one put away, or a defiled woman, or a whore. These he does not take, but a maiden of his own people he does take as a wife. and he does not profane his offspring among his people, for I am Yahuwah who sets him apart. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to Aaron, saying, No man of your offspring throughout their generations who has any defect is to draw near to bring the bread of his Elohim. For any man who has a defect is not to draw near, a man blind, or one lame, or disfigured, or deformed, a man who has a broken foot or broken hand, or is a hunchback or a dwarf, or a man who has a defect in his eye, or eczema, or scab, or is a eunuch. No man among the offspring of Aaron the priest who has a defect is to come near to bring the offerings made by fire to Yahuwah. He has a defect. He does not come near to bring the bread of his Elohim. He does eat the bread of his Elohim, both the most set apart and the set apart. Only he does not go near the veil or approach the altar because he has a defect, lest he profanes my set apart places. For I am Yahuwah who sets them apart. Thus Moshe spoke to Aaron and his sons and to all the children of Israel. Leviticus chapter 22. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to Aaron and his sons, that they separate themselves from the set-apart offerings of the children of Israel, and that they do not profane my set-apart name, and what they set apart to me. I am Yahuwah. Say to them, Any man of all your offspring throughout your generation who draws near the set-apart offerings which the children of Israel set apart to Yahuwah while he has uncleanness upon him, that being shall be cut off from before me. I am Yahuwah. Any man of the offspring of Aaron who is a leper or has a discharge does not eat the set-apart offerings until he is clean. And whoever touches what is rendered unclean by a corpse, or a man who has had an emission of semen, or a man who touches any creeping creature by which he would be made unclean, or any being by whom he would become unclean, even any of his uncleanness, the being who has touched it shall be unclean until evening, and does not eat the set-apart offerings, but shall bathe his body in water. And when the sun goes down, he shall be clean, and afterward eat the set-apart offerings, because it is his food. He does not eat that which dies or is torn by beasts, becoming unclean by it. I am Yahuwah. And they shall guard my charge, lest they bear sin for it and die thereby, when they profane it. I, Yahuwah, set them apart. And no stranger eats the set-apart offering. A sojourner with the priest or a hired servant does not eat the set-apart offering. For when the priest buys a being with his money, he does eat of it. And one who is born in his house does eat his food. And when a priest's daughter is married to a stranger, she does not eat of the set-apart offerings. But when a priest's daughter is a widow or put away and has no child, and has returned to her father's house as in her youth, she does eat her father's food, but no stranger eats of it. And when a man eats the set-apart offering by mistake, then he shall give a set-apart offering to the priest and add 1/5 to it. And let the priest not profane the set-apart offerings of the children of Israel, which they lift up to Yahuwah, or allow them to bear the crookedness of trespass when they eat their set-apart offerings. For I am Yahuwah, who sets them apart. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to Aaron and his sons and to all the children of Israel, and say to them, Any man of the house of Israel, or of the strangers in Israel, who brings his offering for any of his vows, or for any of his voluntary offerings, which shall bring to Yahuwah as a burnt offering, for your acceptance is a male, a perfect one from the cattle, from the sheep, or from the goats. Whatever has a defect you do not bring, for it is not acceptable for you. And when a man brings a peace offering to Yahuwah to complete a vow, or a voluntary offering from the cattle or the sheep, it is to be perfect, to be accepted. Let there be no defect in it. Those blind or broken or having a cut or having ulcer or eczema or scabs you do not bring to Yahuwah, nor make an offering by fire of them on the altar to Yahuwah. As for a bull or a lamb that has any limb deformed or dwarfed, you do prepare as a voluntary offering, but for a vow it is not accepted. Do not bring to Yahuwah what is bruised or crushed, or torn or cut, nor do it in your land. And from a son of a stranger's hand you do not bring any of these as the bread of your Elohim. For their corruption is in them, and defects are in them. They are not acceptable for you. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, When a bull or a sheep or a goat is born, it shall be 7 days with its mother. And from the 8th day and thereafter it is acceptable as an offering made by fire to Yahuwah. But do not slaughter a cow or a sheep and its young on the same day. And when you bring a slaughtering of thanksgiving to Yahuwah, bring it for your acceptance. It is eaten that same day. Leave none of it till morning. I am Yahuwah. And you shall guard my commands and do them. I am Yahuwah. And do not profane my set-apart name, and I shall be set apart among the children of Israel. I am Yahuwah, who sets you apart, who brought you out of the land of Mizraim to be your Elohim. I am Yahuwah. Leviticus chapter 23. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, The appointed times of Yahuwah, which you are to proclaim as set-apart gatherings. My appointed times are these. 6 days work is done. But the 7th day is a Sabbath of rest, a set-apart gathering. You do no work. It is a Sabbath to Yahuwah in all your dwellings. These are the appointed times of Yahuwah, set-apart gatherings which you are to proclaim at their appointed times. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, between the evenings, is the Passover to Yahuwah. And on the 15th day of this month is the festival of unleavened bread to Yahuwah. 7 days you eat unleavened bread. On the first day you have a set-apart gathering. You do no servile work, and you shall bring an offering made by fire to Yahuwah for 7 days. On the 7th day is a set-apart gathering. You do no servile work. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and you shall say to them, When you come into the land which I give you, and shall reap its harvest, then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest. And he shall wave the sheaf before Yahuwah for your acceptance. On the morrow after the Sabbath, the priest waves it. And on that day when you wave the sheaf, you shall prepare a male lamb, a year old, a perfect one, as a burnt offering to Yahuwah. And its grain offering, 2/10 of an ephod of fine flour mixed with oil, an offering made by fire to Yahuwah, a sweet fragrance, and its drink offering, 1/4 of a hin of wine. And you do not eat bread or roasted grain or fresh grain until the same day that you have brought an offering to your Elohim, a law forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. And from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, you shall count for yourselves 7 complete Sabbaths. Until the morrow after the 7th Sabbath, you count 50 days. Then you shall bring a new grain offering to Yahuwah. Bring from your dwellings for a wave offering 2 loaves of bread of 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour. They are baked with leaven, first fruits to Yahuwah. And besides the bread you shall bring 7 lambs, a year old, perfect ones, and 1 young bull and 2 rams. They are a burnt offering to Yahuwah, with their grain offering and their drink offerings, an offering made by fire for a sweet fragrance to Yahuwah. And you shall offer 1 male goat as a sin offering, and 2 male goats a year old as a peace offering. And the priest shall wave them besides the bread of the first fruits as a wave offering before Yahuwah, besides the 2 lambs. They are set apart to Yahuwah for the priest. And on the same day you shall proclaim a set-apart gathering for yourselves. You do no servile work on it, a law forever in all your dwellings throughout your generations. And when you reap the harvest of your land, do not completely reap the corners of your field. When you reap, and do not gather any gleaning from your harvest. Leave them for the poor and for the stranger. I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, In the 7th month, on the 1st day of the month, you have a rest, a remembrance of blowing of trumpets, a set-apart gathering. You do no servile work, and you shall bring an offering made by fire to Yahuwah. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, On the 10th day of this 7th month, in the day of atonement, it shall be a set-apart gathering for you, and you shall afflict your beings, and shall bring an offering made by fire to Yahuwah. And you do no work on that same day, for it is the day of atonement, to make atonement for you before Yahuwah your Elohim. For any being who is not afflicted on that same day, he shall be cut off from his people. And any being who does any work on that same day, that being I shall destroy from the midst of the people. You do no work, a law forever throughout your generations and all your dwellings. It is a Sabbath of rest to you, and you shall afflict your beings. On the 9th day of the month at evening, from evening to evening, you observe your Sabbath. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, On the 15th day of this 7th month is the festival of booths for 7 days to Yahuwah. On the 1st day is a set-apart gathering. You do no servile work. For 7 days you bring an offering made by fire to Yahuwah. On the 8th day there shall be a set-apart gathering for you, and you shall bring an offering made by fire to Yahuwah. It is a closing festival. You do no servile work. These are the appointed times of Yahuwah, which you proclaim as set-apart gathering, to bring an offering made by fire to Yahuwah. A burnt offering and a grain offering, a slaughtering and drink offerings as commanded for every day, besides the Sabbaths of Yahuwah, and besides your gifts, and besides all your vows, and besides all your voluntary offerings which you give to Yahuwah. On the 15th day of the 7th month, when you gather in the fruit of the land, observe the festival of Yahuwah for 7 days. On the 1st day is a rest, and on the 8th day a rest. And you shall take for yourselves on the 1st day the fruit of good trees, branches of palm trees, twigs of leafy trees, and willows of the stream, and shall rejoice before Yahuwah your Elohim for 7 days. And you shall observe it as a festival to Yahuwah for 7 days in the year, a law forever in your generations. Observe it in the 7th month. Dwell in booths for 7 days. All who are native Israelites dwell in booths, so that your generations know that I made the children of Israel dwell in booths, and I brought them out of the land of Mizraim. I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. Thus did Moshe speak of the appointed times of Yahuwah to the children of Israel. Leviticus chapter 24. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Command the children of Israel that they bring to you clear oil of pressed olives for the light, to make the lamps burn continually. Outside the veil of the witness, in the tent of meeting, Aaron is to arrange it from evening until morning before Yahuwah continually, a law forever throughout your generations. He is to arrange the lamps on the clean gold lampstand before Yahuwah continually. And you shall take fine flour and bake 12 cakes with it, 2/10 of an ephah in each cake, and you shall set them in 2 rows, 6 in a row on the clean table before Yahuwah. And you shall put clear frankincense on each row, and it shall be on the bread as a remembrance portion, an offering made by fire to Yahuwah. On every Sabbath he is to arrange it before Yahuwah continually from the children of Israel, an everlasting covenant. And it shall be for Aaron and his sons, and they shall eat it in the set-apart place, because it is most set apart to him from the offerings of Yahuwah made by fire, an everlasting law. And the son of an Israelite woman, whose father was a Mizraite, went out among the children of Israel, and the Israelite woman's son and a man of Israel strove in the camp. And the Israelite woman's son blasphemed the name and cursed. So they brought him to Moshe. Now his mother's name was Shelemith, the daughter of Deborah, of the tribe of Dan. And they put him in under guard, that it might be declared to them at the mouth of Yahuwah. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Bring the one who has cursed outside the camp. And all those who heard him shall lay their hands on his head, and all the congregation shall stone him. And speak to the children of Israel, saying, Anyone who curses his Elohim shall bear his sin. And he who blasphemes the name of Yahuwah shall certainly be put to death. And all the congregation certainly stone him, the stranger as well as the native. When he blasphemes the name, he is put to death. And he who smites the life from any man shall certainly be put to death. And he who smites a beast repays it body for body. And when a man inflicts a blemish upon his neighbor, as he has done, so it is done to him. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. As he inflicts a blemish upon him, so it is done to him. And he who smites a beast repays it, and he who smites a man to death is put to death. You are to have one right ruling for the stranger and for the native. For I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. And Moshe spoke to the children of Israel, and they brought the one who cursed outside the camp and stoned him with stones. And the children of Israel did as Yahuwah commanded Moshe. Leviticus chapter 25. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe on Mount Sinai, saying, Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, When you come into the land which I give you, then the land shall observe a Sabbath to Yahuwah. 6 years you sow your field, and 6 years you prune your vineyard and gather in its fruit. But in the 7th year the land is to have a Sabbath of rest, a Sabbath to Yahuwah. Do not sow your field, and do not prune your vineyard. Do not reap what grows of its own of your harvest, and do not gather the grapes of your unpruned vine, for it is a year of rest for the land. And the Sabbath of the land shall be to you for food, for you and your servant, and for your female servant, and your hired servant, and for the stranger who sojourns with you, and for your livestock and the beasts that are in your land. All its crops are for food. And you shall count 7 Sabbaths of years for yourself, 7 times 7 years, and the time of the 7 Sabbaths of years shall be to you 49 years. You shall then sound a ram's horn to pass through on the 10th day of the 7th month, on the day of atonement. Cause a ram's horn to pass through all your land. And you shall set the 50th year apart, and proclaim release throughout all the land to all its inhabitants. It is a jubilee for you. And each of you shall return to his possession, and each of you return to his clan. The 50th year is a jubilee to you. Do not sow nor reap what grows of its own, nor gather from its unpruned vine. It is a jubilee. It is set apart to you. Eat from the field its crops. In the year of this jubilee, let each one of you return to his possession. And when you sell whatever to your neighbor, or buy from the hand of your neighbor, do not exploit one another. According to the number of years after the jubilee, you buy from your neighbor, and according to the number of years of crops he sells to you. According to the greater number of years, you increase its price, and according to the fewer number of years, you diminish its price, because he sells to you according to the number of the years of the crops. And do not oppress one another, but you shall fear your Elohim, for I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. And you shall do my laws and guard my right rulings, and shall do them, and you shall dwell in the land in safety. And the land shall yield its fruit, and you shall eat to satisfaction, and shall dwell there in safety. And since you might say, What do we eat in the 7th year, since we do not sow nor gather in our crops? Therefore I have commanded my blessing on you in the 6th year, and it shall bring forth a crop for 3 years, and you shall sow in the 8th year, and eat of the old crop until the 9th year. Eat of the old until its crop comes in. And the land is not to be sold beyond reclaim, for the land is mine. For you are sojourners and settlers with me. And provide for a redemption for the land and all the land of your possession. When your brother becomes poor and has sold some of his possession, and his redeemer, a close relative, comes to redeem it, then he shall redeem what his brother sold. And when the man has no one to redeem it, but he himself becomes able to redeem it, then let him count the years since its sale, and return the remainder to the man to whom he sold it, that he shall return to his possession. And if his hand has not found enough to give back to him, then what was sold shall remain in the hand of him who bought it until the year of Jubilee, and it shall be released in the Jubilee, and he shall return to his possession. And when a man sells a house in a walled city, then his right of redemption shall be at the end of the year after it is sold. His right of redemption lasts a year. But if it is not redeemed within a complete year, then the house on the walled city shall be established beyond reclaim to the buyer of it throughout his generations. It is not released in the Jubilee. The houses of villages, however, which have no wall around them are reckoned as the field of the country. A right of redemption belongs to it, and they are released in the Jubilee. As for the city of the Levites and the houses and the cities of their possession, the Levites have a right of redemption forever. And that which is redeemed from the Levites, both the sale of a house and the city of his possession, shall be released in the year of Jubilee, because the houses and the cities of the Levites are their possession in the midst of the children of Israel. But the field of the open land of their cities is not sold, for it is their everlasting possession. And when your brother becomes poor and his hand has failed with you, then you shall sustain him, and he shall live with you like a stranger or a sojourner. Take no interest from him or profit, but you shall fear your Elohim, and your brother shall live with you. Do not lend him your silver on interest, and do not lend him your food for profit. I am Yahuwah your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mizraim, to give you the land of Canaan to be your Elohim. And when your brother who dwells by you becomes poor and sells himself to you, do not make him serve as a slave, but as a hired servant. As a settler he is with you, and serves you until the year of Jubilee. And then he shall leave you, he and his children with him, and shall return to his own clan, even return to the possession of his fathers. For they are my servants, whom I brought out of the land of Mizraim. They are not sold as slaves. Do not rule over them with harshness, but you shall fear your Elohim. And your male and female slaves whom you have from the nations that are around you, from them you buy male and female slaves. And also from the sons of the strangers sojourning among you, from them you buy, and from their clans who are with you, which they shall bring forth in your land, and they shall be your property. And you shall take them as an inheritance for your children after you, to inherit them as a possession. They are your slaves for all times. But over your brothers, the children of Israel, you do not rule with harshness one over another. Now when a sojourner, a settler with you, becomes rich, and your brother with him becomes poor, and sells himself to the settler or sojourner with you, or to a member of the sojourner's clan, after he has been sold, there is a right of redemption to him. One of his brothers does redeem him, or his uncle's son does redeem him, or anyone who is a close relative to him in his clan does redeem him, or if he is able, then he shall redeem himself, and he shall reckon with him who bought him. The price of his release shall be according to the number of years from the year that he was sold to him unto the year of Jubilee, as the days of a hired servant it is with him. If there are yet many years, according to them he repays the price of his redemption from the silver of his purchase. And if few years are left until the year of Jubilee, then he shall reckon with him, and according to his years he repays him the price of his redemption. He is with him as a yearly hired servant, and he does not rule with harshness over him before his eyes. And if he is not redeemed in these years, then he shall be released in the year of Jubilee, he and his children with him. Because the children of Israel are servants to me. They are my servants whom I brought out of the land of Mizraim. I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. Leviticus chapter 26. Do not make idols for yourselves, and do not set up a carved image or a pillar for yourselves, and do not place a stone image in your land to bow down to it, for I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. Guard my Sabbaths, and reverence my set-apart place. I am Yahuwah. If you walk in my laws and guard my commands, and shall do them, then I shall give you rain in its season, and the land shall yield its crops, and the trees of the field yield their fruit. And your threshing shall last to the time of the grape harvest, and the grape harvest shall last to the time of sowing. And you shall eat your bread until you have enough, and shall dwell in your land safely. And I shall give peace in the land, and you shall lie down, and no one make you afraid. And I shall clear the land of evil beasts, and not let the sword go through your land. And you shall pursue your enemies, and they shall fall by the sword before you. And 5 of you shall pursue 100, and 100 of you pursue 10,000. And your enemies shall fall by the sword before you. And I shall turn to you and make you bear fruit, and shall increase you, and shall establish my covenant with you. And you shall eat the old supply, and clear out the old because of the new. And I shall set my dwelling place in your midst, and my being shall not reject you. And I shall walk in your midst, and shall be your Elohim, and you shall be my people. I am Yahuwah, your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mizraim from being their slaves. And I have broken the bars of your yoke, and made you walk upright. But if you do not obey me, and do not do all these commands, and if you reject my laws, or if you're being loath my right rulings, so that you do not do all my commands, but break my covenant, I also do this to you, and I shall appoint sudden alarm over you, wasting disease and inflammation, destroying their eyes and consuming the life. And you shall sow your seed in vain, for your enemies shall eat it. And I shall set my face against you, and you shall be smitten before your enemies, and those who hate you shall rule over you, and you shall flee when no one pursues you. And after all this, if you do not obey me, then I shall punish you 7 times more for your sins. And I shall break the pride of your power, and shall make your heavens like iron, and your earth like bronze. And your strength shall be spent in vain, and your land not yield its crops, nor the trees of the land yield their fruit. And if you walk contrary to me and refuse to obey me, I shall bring on you 7 times more plagues according to your sins, and send wild beasts among you, which shall bereave you of your children. And I shall cut off your livestock, and make you few in number, and your highways shall be deserted. And if you are not instructed by me by these, but walk contrary to me, then I also shall walk contrary to you, and I myself shall smite you 7 times for your sins. And I shall bring against you a sword, executing the vengeance of my covenant, and you shall gather together in your cities, and I shall send pestilence among you, and you shall be given into the hand of the enemy. When I cut off your supply of bread, 10 women shall bake your bread in one oven, and they shall bring back to you your bread by weight, and you shall eat and not be satisfied. And if in spite of this you do not obey me, but walk contrary to me, then I shall walk contrary to you in wrath, and I myself shall punish you 7 times for your sins. And you shall eat the flesh of your sons and eat the flesh of your daughters. And I shall destroy your high places and cut down your sun pillars and put your carcasses on the carcasses of your idols, and my being shall loathe you. And I shall turn your cities into ruins and lay your set-apart places waste and not smell your sweet fragrances. And I shall lay the land waste, and your enemies who dwell in it shall be astonished at it. And I shall scatter you among the Gentiles, and draw out a sword after you, and your land shall be desert, and your cities ruins. And the land enjoy its Sabbath as long as it lies waste, and you are in your enemy's land. Then the land would rest and enjoy its Sabbaths. As long as it lies waste, it rests. For the time it did not rest on your Sabbaths when you dwelt in it. And as for those of you who are left, I shall send faintness into your hearts in the lands of your enemies, and the sound of a shaken leaf shall cause them to flee. And they shall flee as though retreating from a sword, and they shall fall when no one pursues. And they shall stumble over one another as from before a sword, when no one pursues, and you shall be unable to stand before your enemies. And you shall perish among the Gentiles, and the land of your enemies shall eat you up. And those of you who are left rot away in their crookedness in your enemies' lands, and also in their fathers' crookednesses, rot away with them. But if they confess their crookedness and the crookedness of their fathers with their trespass, in which they trespassed against me, and that they also have walked contrary to me, and that I also have walked contrary to them, and have brought them into the land of their enemies, if their uncircumcised heart is then humbled, and they accept the punishment of their crookedness, then I shall remember my covenant with Jacob, and also my covenant with Ishak, and also remember my covenant with Abraham, and remember the land. For the land was abandoned by them, and enjoying its Sabbaths, while lying waste without them. And they were paying for their crookedness, because they rejected my right rulings, and because their being loathed my laws. And yet for all this, when they are in the land of their enemies, I shall not reject them, nor shall I loathe them so as to destroy them and break my covenant with them. For I am Yahuwah their Elohim. Then I shall remember for their sake the covenant of the ancestors whom I brought out of the land of Mizraim, before their eyes of the nations, to be their Elohim. I am Yahuwah. These are the laws and the right rulings, and the Torah which Yahuwah made between himself and the children of Israel on Mount Sinai by the hand of Moshe. Leviticus chapter 27. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, When a man separates a vow by your evaluation of lives unto Yahuwah, when your evaluation is of a male from 20 years old up to 60 years old, then your evaluation shall be 50 shekels of silver, according to the shekel of the set-apart place. And if it is a female, then your evaluation shall be 30 shekels. And if from 5 years old up to 20 years old, then your evaluation for a male shall be 20 shekels, and for a female 10 shekels. And if from a month old up to 5 years old, then your evaluation for a male shall be 5 shekels of silver, and for a female your evaluation shall be 3 shekels of silver. And if from 60 years old and above, if it is a male, then your evaluation shall be 15 shekels, and for a female 10 shekels. But if he is too poor to pay your evaluation, then he shall present himself before the priest, and the priest shall set a value for him. According to the ability of him who vowed, the priest shall value him. And if it is a beast of which they bring an offering to Yahuwah, all such given to Yahuwah is set apart. He is not to replace it or exchange it, good for spoiled or spoiled for good. And if he at all exchanges beast for beast, then both it and the one exchanged for it is set apart. And if it is any unclean beast of which they do not bring an offering to Yahuwah, then he shall present the beast before the priest, and the priest shall value it, whether it is good or spoiled, according to your evaluation, O priest, so it shall be. But if he indeed redeems it, then he shall add 1/5 to your evaluation. And when a man sets his house apart to be set apart to Yahuwah, then the priest shall value it, whether it is good or spoiled. As the priest values it, so it stands. And if he who sets it apart does redeem his house, then he shall add 1/5 of the silver of your evaluation to it, and it shall be his. And if a man sets apart to Yahuwah a field he owns, then your evaluation shall be according to the seed for it, a homer of barley seed at 50 shekels of silver. If he sets his field apart from the year of Jubilee, according to your evaluation, it stands. But if he sets his field apart after the Jubilee, then the priest shall reckon to him the silver due according to the years that remain to the year of Jubilee, and it shall be deducted from your evaluation. And if he who sets the field apart ever wishes to redeem it, then he shall add 1/5 of the silver of your evaluation to it, and it shall be his. And if he does not redeem the field, or if he has sold the field to another man, it is no longer redeemed. But the field, when it is released in the Jubilee, is set apart to Yahuwah as a dedicated field to be the possession of the priest. And if a man sets apart to Yahuwah a field which he has bought, which is not the field of his possession, then the priest shall reckon to him the amount of your evaluation up to the year of Jubilee, and he shall give your evaluation on that day set apart to Yahuwah. In the year of Jubilee, the field returns to him from whom he bought it, to him whose is the possession of the land. And all your evaluations are to be according to the shekel of the set-apart place, 20 gerahs to the shekel. However, a firstborn of the beasts which is firstborn to Yahuwah, no man sets it apart, whether bull or sheep, it belongs to Yahuwah. And if among the unclean beasts, then he shall ransom it according to your evaluation, and shall add 1/5 to it. And if it is not redeemed, then it shall be sold according to your evaluation. However, whatever a man lays under ban for Yahuwah, of all that he has, man and beast, or the field of his possession, is not sold or redeemed. Whatever is laid under ban is most set apart to Yahuwah. No one under the ban among men is ransomed, but shall certainly be put to death. And all the tithe of the land, of the seed of the land, or of the fruit of the tree belongs to Yahuwah. It is set apart to Yahuwah. If a man indeed redeems any of his tithes, he adds 1/5 to it, and the entire tithe of the herd and of the flock, all that passes under the rod, the 10th one is set apart to Yahuwah. He does not inquire whether it is good or spoiled, nor does he exchange it, and if he exchanges it at all, then both it and the one exchanged for it are set apart. It is not redeemed. These are the commands which Yahuwah commanded Moshe for the children of Israel on Mount Sinai.